Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tokyo Living podcast. I've got the pleasure of doing another in-person session here live from the Tower location. Today's guest is Tokyo Supercars founder and CEO, Romen Barua. Romen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So just for the listeners and viewers, perhaps if you can give a little bit of background on yourself, what you've done professionally and what brought you out to Japan.
Sure. So let's see, I'm from the UK originally. Came out here in 2005, so it was pretty much graduated from university in England. I was 22 years old and just planned to come here for 1 year, and then ended up staying 18 years, so kind of unplanned. So I did 2 years in the countryside on the JET program. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
So I did that, then moved to Tokyo and started working in recruiting.
Okay.
So a little bit of a kind of typical path, I feel, as many people in Japan, hey. And then, long story short, I did, how long was that? About 10 years. I was in recruiting at 2 different companies. And then I kind of met the co-founders of Tokyo Supercars during that time, all kind of friends of mine, ex-colleagues as well and acquaintances. There were 4 of us initially. Okay. And then ended up doing kind of a startup and running my own company.
Awesome, yeah. Similar time frame to me. I came out here end of 2004 with a 3-year plan and 18 years later, right? And so have you always had an interest in cars?
Yeah, good question. Not really. Like, you know, I had a couple of cars when I was young in the UK, and then kind of took a break from driving, I'd say, for a while actually, till I came out to Japan. And Tokyo is not really a place you would associate with needing a car for transport, right? So the trains are so convenient here. They're always on time, that kind of thing. Yeah. But in terms of cars, I wouldn't say I was like a car geek or a car fan. Yeah. I just kind of stumbled into the business as a co-founder and as a partner. Some of my co-founders at the start were more kind of car geeks, if you like, or petrol heads or whatever you want to call it. Okay. And then as I kind of got into the business and leaned into it, it was more like the running and the operations of the business that kind of caught my eye or I found more interesting. And then just naturally kind of through osmosis and then starting to really like cars as well. It's kind of developed since I started the company. Yeah.
And what sort of sparked the idea? I mean, how did it come about?
Yeah, so it was just, I guess just one of the co-founders at the time was really into cars and had bought 1 or 2 like supercars, I guess. And just during that time, I had just set up my first business here in Japan, which is in a completely different area in consulting. And it was just more like kind of like an investment-ish proposal, both, partially as, starting a business, but also, it's kind of like buying a property, right? Like if you buy properties, you can create a portfolio of assets. And it was just, that was kind of proposed to me. Yeah. So it was more of like a business kind of investment decision, which now that I've learned 6 years later, cars are not the best investment. Right. I never give that advice to anyone now. It's more like, if it's something you're into, and it's kind of a lifestyle choice as well, with the type of cars that we have. I learned a lot about that. But that's how I kind of got into it originally.
And by definition, superfoods, there's various definitions of what constitutes a superfood depending on who you talk to. Is there a special definition of a supercar? Like, how would you sort of define that? What sort of cars would you put in that category? Yeah,
I think it's mainly to do with performance. I mean, it's to do with like top speed is one attribute. And back in the day, like when I don't know if you ever played Top Trumps, that game where it's like a card game where it's got stats of all the different cars. That was the first time I kind of got into or remember supercars. But anything that does like a top speed of over like 200 miles an hour was like how I remember the kind of benchmark. And then like that 0 to 60 kind of acceleration, they're the 2 key elements of it. And then you have the rest of it, like design, production numbers. It can get quite complicated. There's some like purist car fans or geeks that have very strict criteria about what qualifies and what doesn't, and it's a big rabbit hole.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yeah, standard is top speed and acceleration.
Yeah, and is this sort of model something that has been done? Did you sort of pick it up, get the idea from other cities, other big cities in the world? Is it something that's been done before?
Yeah, sure. Like there is to some degree. I think when we first thought about the business, it was more again like, okay, we have a couple of guys that are like-minded, they want to make these types of investments, and then we actually pulled 8 cars together at that time, which isn't a lot, as a fleet, let's say. And then we started doing a lot more kind of research into what's kind of out there. So you've got your typical car rental companies. So if you go to like Miami or Las Vegas, it's a big business, right? You go and rent Ferraris, Lamborghinis for like $2,000-3,000 a day or half a day or whatnot. But what we do is quite different. It's more like the car sharing type of model. So very similar to Airbnb, what they do for hotels, which is essentially sharing individual owners or corporate owner properties to convey as short stay apartments or hotel-like accommodation. We're doing something similar with cars or luxury cars. Yeah. So there are businesses or platforms like that. So the biggest in the world is in the US. It's called Turo. Okay. And that's where, you can rent pretty much anything that you own on there. And some people have done it to make a side income and a living. We're not quite there yet. I wouldn't describe buy a Ferrari or Lamborghini and you can make a living from it. Right. But it's in that kind of range. And Japan has a few of those services as well. Okay. So Japan has the kind of mass production cars what's it called? Times Plus. I don't know if you heard of that, but these are all like Toyotas and Nissans. They're relatively smaller, cheaper cars, and you can just go rent them. They're parked at car parks all over Tokyo. That is a form of car sharing as well. So there's that kind of mass market service, but then what we do, it's basically $200,000 to $500,000 supercars, and no one really touches that segment in Japan. There's a few small businesses that we actually partner with, but there's one in New York actually called Manhattan Car Club. Okay. And that was when I was doing some research back in 2017. That was the closest what we were thinking. It's more of a community, people that are kind of into cars or into certain lifestyle choices, and then they want to kind of share their cars in a club. Yeah. And then meet other like-minded people. Yeah. So how does the business actually work? So legally, it's car sharing. So the biggest car sharing company in Japan at the moment is called Anycar. They have a couple of 100,000, I don't know exactly the number, but a couple of 100,000 cars on there. But they're all up to the value of around 10 million yen because that's the maximum insurance cap. That one of the major local insurance companies can offer. They actually are 51% stakeholder in that. It's called Aoi Sompo. Okay. So that business was the kind of blueprint that we looked at when we started the business. How do we do this with the correct legal framework? So again, it's not a car rental business. We don't have a fleet. We don't have a shop where we rent our fleet out. So these are all cars that are owned by different individuals. We kind of group those together. We manage those cars, manage those individuals, and then run the business. So the best way to describe it maybe, so with Anycar, it's kind of like a self-service, do-it-yourself type model. So if you had a car, you could list it on the platform. It's a really cool technology product. You can even get one of those card readers installed on your car so that people can just roll up, book the car on the application, roll up, scan their driver's license, that unlocks the car door, and then you can pick the key out and drive off. So it's completely frictionless. You can self-serve and operate. So that's what we looked at, but we couldn't do that model with Ferraris, Lamborghinis. It just didn't mix well, right? Sure. And so the biggest objection we had was who is going to feel comfortable renting out their Lamborghini or Ferrari or whatnot, right? Because it gets quite personal, and people get quite affectionate towards their dream car, if you like. So that was that was the biggest objection. So it's really like what we decided was to build a concierge system where we essentially manage everything on behalf of the owner. Which again, you can do, like, I think there's Airbnb services, for instance, that do that. Like if say you had like a bunch of properties, you just have a company that manages it for you and take a fee or whatnot. So that's how the fundamentals of the business work. We have a concierge system, which is our team. We're in constant contact with all of the customers who want to drive and the owners that own the cars. And then we're essentially running that operation on a daily, hourly basis to deliver. One of the biggest things is insurance. That's the first question. What happens if there's an accident or a scratch? And obviously that's the biggest risk and kind of anxiety you have with this type of business. So there's just a lot of effort that we put into managing, firstly, who gets into the cars. And there's a few different ways we overcome that. And then obviously how you maintain and check the cars, and just the customer service aspect has to be, really high level, especially in Japan, where the expectations are like, things have to be flawless, right?
So in terms of insurance then, are the owners of each car's sort of responsible for having the appropriate insurance, and then you're checking that, or are you going through that insurance process with the owners? How does that sort of work?
Sure. So we have one of the founding members of the company back in 2017. He wasn't like an official founder or investor, but he was kind of seconded from actually Aoi Sompo to help us. So he's an insurance agent. And essentially he, provided this insurance package, so the owner of the car takes out the insurance policy, and that covers drivers who are a certain age that can use that policy when they drive. So that does put like some pressure and liability on the car owner, right? Because if you drive my car, let's say, and you have an accident or scratch, then ultimately it's my policy that has to be then used and executed. So we just had to create a business model and a system where we cover that liability. So in the event of an accident, there's always this deductible you have to pay to the insurance company to trigger the insurance claim. So we just ensure that we take a deposit that covers that amount, as well as if anyone gets into an accident, what happens? Your premiums go up, right? They charge you more. You now become a higher risk customer. So we have to anticipate, okay, what's going to happen for the next 3 years on your insurance policy if you've rented it or shared it with someone that gets into an accident. So those two elements we basically account for in the deposit. So that whole liability is covered. Another thing to mention actually that I remembered is the actual business model. It is sharing. So we actually enter a joint user agreement is the official translation, where I'm officially signing a contract with you to use my car as a joint user. And what that means is it's kind of it is a non-for-profit business in that sense. So whatever the cost of ownership is to me, and that does include even the depreciation of the car on year-by-year basis, obviously car loans, insurance, parking, all the rest of it, maintenance, which they do add up to be fairly significant. All of those costs of ownership are the maximum I could charge you to share my car. So that's the really details of how the business model works.
And then so if someone was to enter into that agreement and use another person's car, are they doing that by a one-time payment, or are people sort of members with you where they'd have a subscription that allows them to, how does that work?
So there's two, eventually we created two different brands and two different companies actually. So one is that kind of subscription membership, and it's really focused on a community. And for that business, we even do like kind of like driving test interviews for all prospect members, because we have to ensure that they're trustworthy, reliable, and they can drive to a certain level, right? We don't take them to the circuit and measure lap times or anything like that. It's more just more character assessment, frankly, and safety, right? because there are small things like just knowing that some of these cars are very low, and when you're going in and out of certain clearance, I don't know, entry points, you just have to know what you're doing. Like there's little mechanisms where you can lift the front of the car up and stuff like that. So anyway, there's that aspect of it, and that's called Club Velocita. And then we have another brand which is probably better known. It's called Tokyo Supercars, and I think how we met as well, right? So that brand, it's more about guided tours in that case. Okay. So that business is very different. Like we are always there, like as a staff, either in the car or in the car in front. Okay. And it's more toward, there's a few services around that, like in Tokyo now. There's different, like, you know, not at kind of the supercar level, but like smaller cars or even the go-kart stuff that you see around. So that type of business model, it's more like guided tours, and that's frankly the biggest part of our business now. Yeah.
How many people do you get wanting to recreate parts of Tokyo Drift?
Oh yeah, I think that's the stereotype like feeling when they come here, right? Yeah. Actually, that serves us well because it's the bright lights and, you know, the bustling city or whatnot. But yeah, it's, you know, there are a few kind of cool spots like how can I say, like car meet areas in and around the city. So there's one in Tatsumi, which is fairly close to the city, but they're all basically parking area service stations. Right. Okay. And they've become like the car hangout spot. Yeah. Where, you know, groups of car people will gather, drive around, and then meet. Some to the extent of, you know, some of the movies you've kind of referenced, but generally it's a lot more chilled out than that. And one of them is called Daikoku Futo, which is kind of like halfway between Yokohama and Tokyo. Okay. And there's like, to some degree it's at night time before the cops come and shut it down. But you just get gatherings of like 20, 30, 50 cars. And so some nights you can just go there, just rock up in your car, and you'll get to see some of the coolest cars like in the world that are just there. Yeah. So that's become a big thing. And then there's very specific car meet days. Like there's every year on the first Sunday of the new year or something like that. In the morning, there'll be a big meet there, and there'll be like 300-400 cars that go through there in the space of 2 hours. So that type of stuff is really specific to Japan, and it's really fun. Like people will, you know, read about it, and so when they come here, they want to kind of experience that. And I'd say that's probably been the most interesting part of our business, to kind of recreate those kind of, you know, dreams that people have to see cool stuff. We do have circuit days, or we facilitate them now, or give people access to get to the circuit. So there's, you know, when people think about cars, they always think about high speed, right? And like, where can you drive them legally? So, you know, first and foremost, we're driving on the roads here, and Japan's not a country you want to mess around in. Like, it's got a specific culture that we all respect, right? So I think, so to answer your question, I think every car has its own kind of story and fanboy club and, you know, background. So a lot of it's to do with that initial acceleration. I think that's always the key. Like, how fast does it do 0 to 60 or 0 to 100? That aspect. But just, you know, that the sound is a big deal. There's so many things, like just, you know, the gearbox. You know, we do have a few stick shift cars now as well that are a bit more nostalgic to certain demographic and age. Right. So we just picked up a new Lamborghini Murcielago, which is more towards the 90s and early 2000s. Okay. And that's all of the, you know, the manual stick shifts. They just jumped up in price by like, I don't know, 60 to 80% in the last year. Like some of them even doubled in price, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of cars that are just harder to get your hands on and have that experience. So yeah, there's a couple of things, like, and the design as well, like how they look, how rare they are. We just got a fairly rare Ferrari last year that they built in low production, things like that. Yeah. Some people just have one car they love. I think the GTR is a Japanese, you know, the Godzilla car that everyone who comes to Japan, they kind of want to try that maybe, or some variation of that. Yeah. But that kind of goes more toward what's known as JDM, which is probably bigger in terms of their fans in a way.
Okay.
But we stick primarily in the kind of supercar bracket, because cars get complicated, right? The categories and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I understand for people that might like the idea of getting in one of these cars and want to have the experience the sound and the rest of the experience, but don't want to actually drive it. You do offer like a passenger service as well. Yeah.
That's kind of surprised me. It's become more popular than we anticipated. At first, it was something we didn't really push or pitch really. Do you want to sit in the passenger seat and kind of be driven around? The other point about being a passenger or driving is the kind of content that people really want to get. So now we're in the age of social media, Instagram, TikTok, and I think that's kind of helping our business a lot. So folks that come here, that they want to get a video of them riding in a cool car around Tokyo in particular, right? So whether that's Tokyo Tower, which is close to here, or getting out to Hakone with a view of Mount Fuji, or whatever it is, circuit-related stuff as well. That's become a really big part of our business as well. So we do have our own in-house content creators, and we can offer that as part of the service, right? If someone's driving and they want to be basically filmed driving a cool car, like with dramatic sequences or whatnot, with engine sounds and all the rest of it. So that kind of multi-camera setup with cars next to you, rolling shots, we have that option as well. And you can still do that as a passenger. It's not probably as cool maybe, but and the other point is just, as you say, there's, just being driven around in Tokyo, and people don't really realize what the fun part is. It's kind of comparable to like, theme park ride-ish, right? Obviously we're safe and abiding by the law, but that initial like G-force and acceleration is something that people just don't pick up. So we often get comments like, that was a lot more fun than I expected, especially from like the spouse of, the customer who loves cars. And they'll bring, maybe their wife or girlfriend or son or daughter. And that's the feedback we often get, that people kind of enjoyed it more than they expected, even as a passenger. Especially, I'd say in the last 6 months, we invested in a lot of new cameras. I was always told that content is not about the equipment, it's about the content creation process or whatever. But with cars, it's definitely about the cameras as well, right? So we've got these cool, the Insta360 camera, which has been great. So you kind of put it on the back of the car. It's got this selfie stick. So we've got to be careful how far back we put it for safety. But it essentially shoots in 360 mode in I don't know if you played Grand Theft Auto, that computer game, or any car game where the visual point is directly behind the kind of chase mode. You can get those like real shots of all the cars driving through Tokyo. So that's been a big hit. And has attracted a lot of attention, and a lot of people want to kind of do the experience with that type of like memory or camera work. So that's another big thing that we've focused on, providing that service as part of the experiences. So we pretty much, actually we have more cars than ever now. We have close to 40 on the platform, and quite diverse range. So the two-seater supercars are the most popular. So Lamborghini, if you go to Google, if you look at the Google data, Lamborghini gets Googled the most, like Lamborghini rental or Lamborghini drive. And then Ferrari is probably a close second, and then some of the other kind of exotic brands. SUVs and stuff like that, like more toward transport and utility vehicles, are starting to get more popular as well. We have 2 Lamborghini Urus, which is the Lambo SUV, and they surprisingly again get more bookings than I would expect, because if I was going to spend that money, I would go, two-seater Lambo with the roof down, and want to hear it and kind of have fun. But yeah, they get a lot of bookings as well, especially for families or even couples. A bit more of a comfortable ride. And then you've got those kind of GT cars that are a little bit more in the middle, the Grand Tourers, that bit longer distance. So if you're going, for a 2-hour drive to like the mountains or whatever, it can get a bit uncomfortable and noisy and energy draining in those kind of two-seater cars. Right. Sorry, not two-seater cars, but the kind of harder suspension chassis supercars, right? That are more built for high performance. Yeah. There's a good variation, diversity.
I don't suppose you got any demand in your fleet for a 2013 Mitsubishi IMF? Would that class as a supercar?
Surprisingly, probably. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that something like that. We just picked up a Porsche Cayenne, which we probably wouldn't advertise as our supercar experience, but for the members, like that. Sometimes we were like, hey, have you just got like a normal car? Like we get that question sometimes. Someone wants to do something practical. So maybe.
Right. So if people are interested in this service and this experience, how can they go about booking, looking further into it, or getting a little bit more information? What's your website? What's your socials?
Sure. So the website is the easiest way to make a booking or inquiry. We don't really have instant booking function just because of the nature of checking a few different things. Instagram is the other place. We get a lot of bookings recently. We're doing a lot of different content.
So Romen, it was great to get you on and find out a little bit more about the origins of business and how the service actually runs. So thank you very much for your time today. So if you've enjoyed listening to Romen talk about the experience that his company offers, then get in touch with Tokyo Supercars or check them out on their Instagram. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.